My CEO came to me and said, listen, we certainly thought you would be good for this role, but we checked with one of your peers who had been there as long as I had been, another VP. And she said, if you get promoted, she will quit. I sat down a couple of days later with the senior leader, and this is where the feedback comes in. And she was like, you are responsible for 50% of this. How competitive I've been with her, how I haven't invested in this partner. You are responsible for this happening. This is not happening to you. You did this.
That story comes from my guest today, Joanna Lord. She's so impressive. If you don't know Joanna, she is a 4-time CMO, including stops at some of the biggest, baddest companies out there. Skyscanner, ClassPass, Porch, Reforge. She's advised like a bajillion companies. She's on board. She invests. She's so impressive. I got to sit down with her and hear her story. And so she came on the show to share a little bit of her journey and a bunch of the speed bumps in her very impressive career. So in addition to the story that you just heard a preview for, which is all about her going for her first CMO position and getting blocked by a coworker and learning that she was too competitive and that kind of cost her this promotion. She learned this very painful lesson. She also talked about navigating imposter syndrome that led her to a panic attack on a plane. We explored some of her biggest mistakes at work. But selfishly, my favorite part was hearing her perspective on being qualified versus being capable, which is something that we all need to hear. Anyways, it's enough from me. Let's go ahead and hear from Joanna.
So I grew up in Vermont, a little colonial town called Castleton. So most people know the mountains. I had nothing to do with the mountains. I'm a horrible skier. It freaks everyone out. A lot of people come to ski Vermont mountains on vacation, but it's a beautiful place to grow up. I'm so thankful for it. It is a very grounding place for me. I feel like I grew up in a very simple way of life, a lot of community. People care about people. They show up. It's very, you say what you want to say. You don't say much more. I love that. Every time I go home, I feel very full. I feel very recharged. And then I think young Joanna, I was always a little loud for Vermont. I talk a lot. I asked a lot of questions, very ambitious, very driven. And so while I have not moved back to Vermont, it's taken me a lot of places. And Vermont's kind of my touchstone. I go home a lot to kind of recharge and refuel.
What was one of your first jobs? Did you start work at 14 and a half like a bunch of us did?
Yeah, I did. So my very first job was I created my own newspaper called the Sand Hill Saturday Times because we lived on Sand Hill Road. And I created my own paper. I went around and interviewed our neighbors about things like some of them were getting a new pet or putting on an addition or came home from college. And I would go interview them. And I made a 1-sheeter and I delivered it every Saturday. And so I think I got a buck a paper or something. And we've kept a lot of those, which is very funny. Definitely my first foray into journalism. So that was my first job.
Did you think that would be your future also?
I definitely knew at a young age, writing and storytelling was a big part of who I am. So when I was a child, I didn't sleep a lot. I was a very creative, active mind. I collaged and wrote poems and colored my entire room. And so I think doing something like journalism or telling stories was always in me. And it's probably why I was kind of shepherded that path as I kind of came out of high school and went into journalism and eventually into communications. Because if there was an extra minute, I was writing something, and I think that I became kind of both a student and a lover of great stories.
I saw you went to St. Mike's, which is, for those that don't know, and I was in Burlington or South Burlington, I forget.
It's technically South Burlington, yeah.
So you go to St. Mike's, you graduate. Were you a marketing or journalism major there?
I did a journalism major, yep.
And so what are your first couple steps from graduating from St. Mike's into the version of you that I get to meet today? Maybe just tell us kind of how you got into marketing.
So I did my undergrad at St. Mike's. Then I went straight into my master's degree. There was a small moment in time where I thought would be in academia, like a professor. I had this young dream of wearing a big cable knit sweater in the mountains and thinking about the future of journalism. So I got accepted to Pepperdine out in Malibu. And that was pretty life-changing. At that senior year, actually, of high school, before I went into college at St. Mike's, my mother passed away. I was 17. She died of cancer. So it was a very hard time in my life. And when I ended up going to St. Michael's because it was closer to home and I could get a scholarship. And as I was there, I was I want to kind of get as far away from what I know as possible. I felt this need to run for obvious reasons. And I ran as far as I could to the opposite coast till I hit water, actually, on the Malibu cliffs. And I studied online communication, which actually was an emerging curriculum at a lot of advanced institutions. And I actually studied online persuasion as a minor. So I was trying to understand, like, how do we communicate online and, through computers? And it was the rise of chat rooms and online communities and online personas, profile names, bios. And I was just in love. Journalism was struggling at the time. And so I really saw this, a lot of my classes were about marketing. I hadn't really heard the word marketing. Vermont's not like a place where, we don't even allow billboards next to the roads. I think it was the first time when I went out to California and I was living in LA and I was like, wow, there's a whole discipline called marketing. I'm actually pretty interested in it. In fact, I was insatiable about it and I just fell in love. And I thought I would go on to teach it, but I ended up deciding after I got my master's to take a job at my first startup. Basically, because my oldest brother said, it's time for you to get a job. That was the catalyst I needed. And I looked on Craigslist and I found a small startup in Gardena, California. And that was my big jump into the real world.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, through Craigslist. I feel like you probably don't get too many more tech jobs in Craigslist.
At that point, the intersection of my life was on Craigslist, right? Like I was buying microwaves and getting jobs. It was really interesting. It was two brothers. They had started an online like retailer kind of drop ship in fitness supplements actually and health conscious products. And I was everything. I was the front desk. I was the customer service rep. I packed the warehouse boxes. And it was at that time that Google AdWords opened and I got to be one of the first advertisers. And that was like it was really cool. We were one of the first bidders in our category and that kind of put me on this path.
Wow, that's super cool. As you shared that story, the Craigslist thing, I got an interview at HubSpot way back in the day. I worked at HubSpot in the early days because they advertised on Craigslist. That was probably like in 2010 when I saw it. Like it was a while back. Yeah. But man, you're bringing me back here. That's wild.
Craig out there changing lives. Yeah. What can you do?
Yeah, for sure. I want to dig into some of the speed bumps and some of the kind of the learning moments along the way. So one of the ones that I'd love to hear your perspective on, so as your career continues on, is feedback. A lot of what I do as a coach is I help people. And normally the reason why they want help is because something has happened that they're having a hard time letting go of. And it's usually like some feedback or some situation that happened that becomes part of their identity that are just not able to move past on their own and they need some help doing it. And so I'm curious for you, if there's been either a moment in time or a piece of feedback that stung that you took with you for a little bit of time and what it was.
I've actually had a lot of feedback that has shaped and changed who I am because and we'll get into it here, but like, I've been in tech now about 20 years, right? The glorious like 20-year thing. And I think in the first 10 years was just a mess, at least like complete mess. Like I was making so many mistakes. I was running so fast. I didn't have a lot of mentorship. I certainly didn't have a coach. And the only real coaching I had was moments of feedback. And sometimes they were delivered well. And like sometimes they just completely wrecked me. And I'm a believer in feedback. I'm a believer in getting it and giving it well. But there was one piece of feedback. It's the most pivotal feedback I ever got. And it was the first time I was completely wrecked, like just broken down. I was working at a company, one of my first startups where, I'd kind of been promoted within quite a bit. I was VP of growth, which was again, like a new title at the time. And I had a great CMO and he was leaving, right? He had resigned to go to another company. I learned a lot under him and he's like, listen, I'm going to put you up for promotion. I think you deserve this job. And I was so excited. I felt, excited and ready. It was neither things. And then my CEO came to me and said, listen, we certainly thought you would be good for this role, but we checked with one of your peers who had been there as long as I had been, another VP. And she said, if you get promoted, she will quit. So she will not work for you. And because of that, that's pretty much that plus some tears is how I responded. And he said, because of that, we're going to also look at external candidates. We're going to slow the process down. We're not going to give you the role right away. And so I was wildly mad, just like, just devastated, right? Went home and cried. I was like angry. I was like, why is she sabotaging me? All sorts of emotions, all projected at her, none of it taking accountability for me. And I remember I sat down a couple of days later with a senior leader, and this is where the feedback comes in. And she was like, you are responsible for 50% of this, right? This is not happening to you. You did this. And she kind of walked through like how competitive I've been with her, how I haven't invested in this partner. I haven't shown any way that I would have supported her. Like, because I was very, until that point, focused on me being promoted, me succeeding, me winning. And I'd been kind of rewarded for that. I did not know how to be a leader. I did not know how to be a manager. I had just kind of gone through my successes And I think I needed someone to just look at me and be like, you're responsible for this. Like, and the feedback really was, you will not go far, much further, really, than where you are today if this is how you continue. And she was so blunt. And she was like, you've tapped out at this like senior, ambitious IC Joanna. And you have to decide now, if you want to lead, you must change. So it hurt and it was hard. And it's totally changed how I think about everything, really. Like, I have just such a different philosophy now,
This episode is presented by Navattic. If you've been following me or you're a fan of this show, you know how bullish I am on the interactive demo space and how much I love the Navattic team. Done a ton of stuff with them over the years, and they just dropped a bunch of new features that are really exciting. First, they've got a new template library. You can choose from a bunch of pre-made templates that have the most common demo use cases and all of the best practices built in, help you go 0 to 1 in a few seconds. If you're not sure what to build, they also have a new AI storyboard generator. It's exactly how it sounds. You drop in a website URL or some copy or a landing page, whatever you've got, it reads the information, pulls out the key sections, and then builds a working product demo for you in a couple minutes. And after you've built your demo, you're gonna probably want to use your data as part of your go-to-market approach. They've got a bunch of plug-and-play demo playbooks where you can send that interaction data to your CRM. You can use it to trigger alerts, all kinds of good stuff. It's actually a bunch of the things that my team built manually. It took us forever when I was in-house. So I love this. And after you've built your demo, if you need to make any adjustments, if you're displaying numbers or data as part of that, they have a new table AI feature, which helps you to clean up that data in a more conversational way and at scale in just a few seconds. They have made it so stinking easy to use your product as your marketing tool without needing an engineer or heavy design work. You can get started with all of this in their free plan. Check it out at navattic.com/value to get started. That's navattic.com/value. Can I ask a few questions if it's not too painful to go back there?
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Okay. So let's go back to the first conversation with the CEO, because I'm so curious about the catalyst here. He back-channeled some feedback. Is that kind of what happened? There's like some back-channel conversation. So your current boss puts you up for his job as they're leaving. Your CEO says, yeah, maybe, and back-channel some feedback. This person has what they say about you. How did the CEO then share that with you? Like, did you have a sit down with him? Were you already meeting with him? Does he set up like this random meeting on your calendar and you think you're getting the job that day? Like, take us to that moment a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think I was getting the job that day. And by the way, I actually believe deeply in I think the back channeling is so beautiful. And I think a lot of people don't realize early in their career that if you're going to be internally promoted, there will be a lot of sponsorship that needs to happen from everyone at all levels, right? Like people you work with every day and people you might work with once a month. Get some say into your career. And that's what happened here. We chatted all the time. He's an amazing CEO. He's founded a lot of companies. And I adore him. He actually really championed radical candor in our culture. And he sat down and he's like, listen, there's a lot that makes us want to put you in this role, but this gives me severe pause, right? And I think partly because her and I had kind of started around the same time. We had the same tenure. We'd contributed meaningfully to the company, both of us in our own ways. Her more from the inbound direction, me more from the growth performance side. And he wanted her to be part of the decision. And there were other people that also were part of the decision that were more advocates of it. But I think he was like, it gives me pause that maybe I need to understand the dynamics more. And I remember he said it and we talked about it and he was like, I know you're upset. Let's just take a little time, give it a little space. And I remember going home and just like sobbing, just sobbing for all sorts of reasons, shame, underachieving, and also just real feedback, right? Like you can go through years and not get real feedback. And then you get real feedback and you're like, it's me and the feedback now. It's the dance,
And so you go home, you do some processing, which probably is not a one night thing, probably, I don't know how long, but probably a while thing. The person, you said you met with another woman who was a little bit of a mentor to you. How did that conversation happen? Did you initiate it? Were you venting to them and they shared the feedback on the spot? Did you ask for that conversation? Like, to help us understand that, because most people don't do this, right? No. They get something, the thing happens, they feel shame about it, they vent to their partner, to their friends, they go, fuck that place, and they either double down and work harder or they leave and they go somewhere else. And so I'm curious, you did something a little bit different. You did a half step here. Tell us about that.
I love that you call it a half step because everything you just said, I felt that whole roller coaster. Like your initial reaction when you're told, because what's at the heart of all this is I felt I was being told I wasn't wanted. This was just like this constant need to to be needed because it makes us feel unique and special. And that's a human nature trait. And I think about that a lot as a leader now, right? And so I was hearing I wasn't needed. So my first reaction was, fuck this place. And I think it was like, well, just get a new job. And I did end up eventually getting a new job. I didn't take the CMO role there. But when I reached out to the senior leader, I was actually expecting to sit down and have her, I thought she would validate me. I remember we got coffee, and I met with her regularly. She was in the office and she had a lot more experience than me. She'd worked at larger companies. She was junior to me, but senior in mandate and experience. She was in a different function. And again, I had been promoted really young. Like, I can't stress it enough. I think it's a beautiful, but also like a double-edged sword, right? I was a VP at 28 or something. So I sat down with her. I thought she was going to validate me, and she didn't take the bait. She said, let me take a step back and let me offer you a different perspective. And that was when I shifted my mindset from will be successful based on what I do to people are successful based on what we do. And it's like I believe in the rising tide philosophy, which is truly, we will all go further together. It's that age-old saying of you go fast alone. I don't even think you go that fast alone anymore. I think you get fast and further together. And I preach it to my teams now, and it's truly a preach. I see two senior peers starting to duke it out in their own soft way, or they start to talk to me about each other, and I bring them together. I go, 0-sum game, my friends. Like, interstitch your success. Like, you will only be successful if the two of you interstitch yourselves. And I think I hadn't learned that. And this woman sat down with me and she was like, real talk, you are picking the wrong path. That's what she said. She's like, don't double down on this road. You are wrong, basically. And
it sounds like she kind of changed the trajectory of your professional life with that combo.
Everything.
Wow.
And maybe, again, back to the, young Joanna, I was rewarded for being competitive. And I played a lot of team sports, but I played a lot of like pivotal roles, like center half in soccer and point guard. And I like to be in front. My natural leadership style is leading from the front. I'll take you to the top of the hill. I'm fine with being wrong at the top of my lungs. But the shadow side of that is it's not about me. It has to be about us. I think that's a hard lesson. Maybe it can be done. I couldn't learn that on my own. Like, I've had to have really great coaches and mentors reflect back on me, how it's holding me back. And I'm so thankful, honestly. But I'll take it all day, every day. Because I have moments of it still. And someone has to be like, whoa, Joanna, you're leaning in on the wrong side of this.
But it's really cool. I was going to ask you, one of the questions I always ask, because I feel like when you get feedback on something, you then see it with other people and in other places. And I was going to ask you as a leader, if you've seen it with other folks, and if so, if you've said something or how you've navigated it. But you already mentioned, you said, yes, I've seen it many times, and I pull those folks aside and I try to hit it head on. Do you share your personal story as part of that, and kind of how you learned the lesson and how it's helped you?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever shared this story in a podcast or on stage. So you're getting it like it's my first kind of public opening of it. But I've shared it privately a lot because I see it all the time. And I think, again, they don't even know. Sometimes they think they're doing the right thing, right? I always say there's kind of two ways to get better, right? It's either you make everyone at your level look worse, which is what most natural predisposition is. It's like, oh, they don't do that well, but like, that means I do. And like, that's the wrong path, right? No. Or just get better. That's the other way to get better. Is just get better, just rise. And I think what I think is so fascinating is the exponential success you have. If you say, I'm not just going to rise individually, I'm going to help that person be better. And I do believe over my career, the concept of augmentation, like no one, I think in tech, we try to become one of one, like I'm the best at. I don't really buy that anymore. I think like duos and triads are really powerful and like augmenting each other. And you can't really do that well unless you're willing to say, I'm not good at something that you are better at. And so I really do now as a leader and manager encourage really vulnerable, uncomfortable conversations between two people that need each other, which is often, right? Product and eng, product and marketing, marketing and sales, engine data, name it. The duads and triads are where the growth is. And so what are we doing here,
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the show. If you are, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on. The data shows something like 40% of the people who listen to the show are actually subscribed. It is the best way for you to support the show, and it helps the algorithm find other listeners who are just like you. If you're feeling generous, a quick rating or review makes a huge difference as well. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. Now let's get back to this episode. That's cool. You got that lesson, even though it was painful. All right, one more question on this, and I promise we'll get you off the hot seat on this one. Going back in time, you have the meeting with the CEO. You've got a whole bunch of, I'm going to use my words, not yours, so you don't have to nod along if this isn't true, but you got some fuck you energy after that. Then you meet with this woman, and now you've got a different type of energy, and now you're starting to have a different perspective, and you're thinking, hey, geez, maybe I did things without realizing it that now put me in this position. You don't leave for some time later. How do you go back to work after that? Because you have all this weird feelings. You still have to go to work. You're still in a pretty senior position. You're still a VP. You know, folks are looking at you. Your CEO is probably looking at how you're acting. What's your internal dialogue during that kind of messy, weird middle period of time?
I will say I didn't stay that long. I did stay a while. They were still looking. I was still part of the conversation when I decided to leave. And again, I can't compliment this place enough because I was having conversations with the CEO and COO as I was thinking through all this. So I remember meeting with the CEO again and being like, I got this feedback and I'm thinking through it. So it was a very, and I know this is a luxury, but it was a very kind place to be so humbled. Let's just call it. But I remember at that time, I almost felt more confident because I could act on something.
Yeah, right. You had a new playbook.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. So I remember I started coming in and I started to be a more active listener to everyone, by the way, which is so interesting about feedback, right? Because it was about this one instance. But the reality is I was kind of bulldozing a lot of people. And so I started asking more questions and I started not being the first to hit reply on the email always. And sure as hell, like everything got easier, right? And I remember I started working with a coach at that time, and she went on to be my coach for quite some time. She's remarkable. And she said, she's like, because I also knew I was probably going to leave, you know, and I was starting to talk to other companies. And she goes, there's a real confidence that comes when you can just be yourself, be you, and you've discovered something about yourself, and then you just start to be 100% who you are. Like, you'll be surprised at how people will respond to it. Because I think before that, I was trying to be what I needed to be, and that never works. It was actually, for me, it was a very empowering experience. And I don't know, maybe because that's how I think about things. I like to learn and try to do something differently. So that, and it's the growth hacker in all of us, right? It's like, let me tweak this and see what happens. And so it worked for me. That colleague and I we never really found common ground. I'm not going to pretend it was all perfect. You know, she went on to do great things in her career. I've gone on to do great things in mine, but we never really learned to come together as one. And that happens sometimes.
Yeah. But you got the lesson and you took it with you.
Yeah.
Which is all you can control.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I'll hear all the time, both from myself and from clients, is moments of imposter syndrome, which everybody defines a little bit differently. But the way I think about it are times when you feel like you are in a position that you didn't deserve, or you don't belong in, or you're outside of your depths. Have you ever felt any of that in your journey?
I mean, all the time. I imagine most of your people you interview say the same thing all the time. It comes up in days I don't expect it, and has come up in almost every role I've been in. There have been some moments like much more acutely than others, but there's always a little bit of, should I even be in this chair? Like, should I be in this room? Am I the least qualified person to talk on this thing? So it's definitely something I've dealt with a lot in my life.
And is there, as you share that, is there like a moment that pops up in your head that as you share that reflection, you're like silently thinking about?
Oh yeah, I'll share one. And I will say, I think partly because it was kind of the culmination of a lot of things, but like, I'm young for where I got in my career. I was like fast to grow into it. I'm a female. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, you're a woman leader in marketing. So common. Honestly, Andrew, not when I started. It was like, you know, I started in SEM and SEO. It was like a very male dominated field. I'm also like barely 5'1". I'm like a pocket sized person, you know, just like, so I walk into a room and there's a lot of projection of inadequacy on me. Like, what is she doing here sort of thing. Some I create, but some truly people are like, what is she doing here? And then I'll have to be like, no, I'm actually the CMO. You know, this is my chair, right? Like, so I've had a lot of those moments, but one really does stand out, and I'll go deep on it because, oh, Andrew, this was a good one. So I had just taken the Sky Scanner CMO job. This was such an interesting thing for me because it was my first global role. It was my largest team. Like, I went from ClassPass to Sky Scanner. So ClassPass was domestic mostly. Some international. Sky Scanner was a huge company, one of the largest travel search companies in the world. We had offices all around the world. My team was like 300 people. I had, kind of marketing, product, and data. It was just so expansive. And I remember I went to the Miami office because I was based out of London. I also moved to a new country with my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. Thankful he was up for that journey. Moved to a new country, which is wild. So I came back to Miami to do our AMA in our Americas team. Gotta love it. I can still picture the gentleman who asked me, but he raised his hand. He's like, given your experience, gotta love the preface sentence, given your experience to date, what makes you confident you can do this job? And I just froze because I had absolutely no answer.
So this is a company-wide AMA, or is it an AMA with your team? Like, help us to understand like what the room is and sort of the context of what's supposed to happen in the room.
It was the AMA of the entire Miami office, which was cross-functional and for all of Americas. So we had, I forget how many total offices. I think we had like 9 international offices. We're really large in EMEA, like a Skyscanner is like the destination in EMEA. We're growing very fast and large in APAC, right? So we had everything in Singapore, Hong Kong. And then we have an emerging Americas business because South America is heavily reliant on Skyscanner to travel. We're the smallest in the US, right? Because like we've got Kayak here and Expedia and all these other ones. But so it's very large. There's probably over 100 people, but it was all cross-functional, all levels, like VP of people to head of commercial, marketing. And they all came to meet the new CMO.
And so that's what it is. It's a meet the CMO.
Meet the CMO.
Meeting.
I'm doing the tour. So I'm meeting everyone in the company. I went to like 4 different cities. I think it was like Miami, Barcelona, Singapore, and Edinburgh, which is where we're headquartered. And met them in Miami. I think it was my first AMA. They sent me to America.
Boy.
They thought it'd be the easy one, They should like me more. And gotta love Americans, just straight to the point. And I think I freaked out. And I actually, to my right, I remember the VP of people, kind of the head of the people business partner, was like to my right. And I felt like I could like feel the energy, like, I hope you have a great answer, because there had been a lot of marketing leadership change. We were going into a very challenging season, like challenging in the sense of we were doing a lot. We had to do a rebrand. We were launching new business lines. We were shifting our business model economics. Marketing needed a complete rework, structurally, functionally, all the usual suspects. And I had no answer. And Andrew, I think my answer in the room, now I'll talk about how I felt, but in the room was so bad. It was something like, well, I won't be doing it alone, like we'll be doing this together. Like as I was saying the words, I was like, this isn't working, and I remember thinking, I don't think I've left this room more confident than I entered it, like with their confidence in me. And then I got to go on a 7-hour flight where I had a panic attack about my inadequacy as the CMO of Skyscanner.
Did you really? You really did?
I did. I remember I was in the seat just like, and also I'll go into this in a minute, but I had my one-on-one with my CEO the next day, who's an amazing man and leader. But I was like, how am I going to prepare for this? Because he's going to hear about this. It wasn't the best AMA. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm already screwing up. I'm like 9 days into the biggest job. And I'm screwing up. I'm just, this is great. And I remember being like, also, Joanna, you should probably have an answer. I remember being like, what's your answer? Why are you qualified for this job? And that was hard because I had been consulting with Skyscanner. And so it felt very fluid to come in. The CEO had been recruiting me for a while. When I was at ClassPass, I had flown and met a lot of the team. So it was fluid. I didn't have the like moment before a job where you ask if it's the right one. This felt right to me. But once I was on the inside, I was like, and why am I qualified again?
Okay, so you're on the plane, having this horrible moment on the plane, and that you've got your one-on-one? Like, is that pre-scheduled with the CEO? Like, that's already on the calendar. It's happening no matter what? Okay.
Yep.
And you're forecasting what could be discussed in the meeting. It's probably making you feel even worse. So I'm curious to know, going into the meeting, how are you feeling? Like that morning when you woke up and you're like, shit, now I got to go meet with the CEO. Is that a morning when you're just playing what you want to, do you say anything? Are they going to say something? I don't know. At a CMO level, if you make a one-on-one doc for a meeting with the CMO, probably not, I'm guessing. So it's probably not on the doc, but like who initiates and how does that go if it happens?
Yeah. So I had a one-on-one scheduled with my CEO the next day. And in general, and I love this, I think when you're taking on your next big role, and there are these very like step ladder moments in our career, right? Where like it's a much bigger mandate or a much bigger team. I had a couple of those happening at once. So we were in constant contact. I met with him every day for the first couple of months, I felt like. And he traveled a lot with me to some of the new offices. He just didn't happen to be in this one with me. So anyways, I felt very comfortable. Again, we had had a relationship prior to me coming in the sense that we have a shared ethos and philosophy. This is a type of leader. Again, I would work with him a million times over if I could. He makes you feel very comfortable in sharing exactly how you're feeling. So I didn't prep a doc. I remember I did wake up that morning being like, we're going to talk about this. I'm wondering, I'm honestly thinking, Andrew, I'm going to ask him why he hired me. I need almost like a pep talk, right? And I think that's the other thing we think about in these moments of imposter syndrome. Who is around you really matters. You know, who you're working for, not just your manager, but the environment you're in during those moments, because they're inevitably going to happen. But who you fill the room with in your career, and that's why we say that people are so important. It's not just you like working with them. How are they going to show up when you need someone to show up is a really important thing I think about. But anyway, so I walk in, I meet with Brian. His name's Brian Dove, exceptional CEO. And I told him what happened. He's like, yeah, I actually heard about that. You know, he had kind of heard like about the AMA. I was like, cool. And I was like, I felt so bad, right? Like I'm freaking out. Like I'm not qualified. And this was the best thing he's ever said to me. And, you know, again, I've heard it since, but he was the first to introduce it to me. He said, Joanna, I didn't hire you because you were qualified. I hired you because you're capable. And he said, because you're beyond capable. And he kind of explained the difference of the two to me. And he was like, you have so many of the traits that we need right now. Have you done it exactly how we needed it done? No. That would make you qualified. And he goes, but like, this makes you capable. And we talked through the fact, like, he's like, I need change management leadership. I had that in spades, Andrew. He's like, I need someone who understands how to centralize marketing stack, like performance lifecycle, and do that in a way the engineering and product are excited and not. I've done that a million times. I need someone to restructure teams, hire in great talent, kindly let some talent go. Like, I've done that hundreds of times. He's like, I need someone who can help us expand into Horizon 2 while maintaining more efficiently Horizon 1, you know, in our current core product. I've done that before. He helped me see these traits I have, these skills. And I left thinking, oh, I've got this, you know. But it was such a like changing philosophy for me because, one, if I hadn't had that conversation with him, what would have happened? Would I have downward spiraled and sabotaged myself and quit? And gone into the room and been to the board like, I'm not the one. Like, maybe, like, that happens all the time, actually. And you let that voice become the voice. But then the other thing is, like, we are not qualified for these jobs. That's the point. But we're capable. That's why we're hired. And it just made me think fundamentally different about how I lead my teams, you know?
I appreciate you sharing that. I think there's a lot of folks who are going to nod along when they listen to this, who are applying to jobs where they feel unqualified, but are probably capable. And so I really like that tension. That's really a tension that's like kind of in between the ears. Yeah. You know, that like self-talk that I'm not good enough for this. So that's amazing that you got that pep talk, that you've taken that with you. As a leader yourself, have you ever been in a situation where you've needed to give a pep talk like that to someone else? Did you observe something like maybe in what your CEO observed with you?
Yeah, I hope I didn't let them get to the panic attack point, but you never know what, I mean, like, I've definitely had many leaders on my team where this was the biggest role they stepped into. And the other thing I'll say about it, because this is actually a Reforge ethos that I deeply believe in. I believe it was Fareed Mosavat's philosophy, but it was a co-authored piece. And they talk about the mix of environment and skill. And how, you know, you can have a remarkable talent, but if they don't fit the environment, it won't matter. Or you can have a remarkable environment, and if the talent isn't the skill, they don't have the skill set, it won't matter. And it takes the two. And that's why I so am a believer of this. And I would say to leaders that have come on my team, I'm hiring you for the traits you have, because you can put those in a lot of different environments. But like, no one has done the exact same job at the exact same category, at the exact same moment of growth, the exact same competitive dynamics of the exact same market twice.
And if you had, you wouldn't want to take the job because it'd be so boring.
It'd be so boring. And there's so much serendipity and context that has to be around you. And so what we're really looking for is people that can adapt, that have like core traits and, you know, soft and hard skills that they can lean on while they figure it out. And so that's what I say to my leaders. I go, I didn't hire you because I knew 100% you were the perfect brand leader for this complex brand challenge we're having. I hired you because You know the skills, comms, PR, social, content design, but you have a knack for insights. And we don't know the answer to this question yet. And I need someone who can go find that cultural zeitgeist insight that can steer the whole strategy. And that's what you're best in the world at. And like, it's amazing when you reflect that back on someone, how they come alive, because it's true. That's the other thing. Like, you're like, just no one ever told them before, you know? And that's so cool, because then they get to wake up with swagger. And there's nothing more powerful than swagger, you know?
Hell yeah. Hey, if you're enjoying the stories on this show and feeling like you're ready to tackle some of your own hurdles, I'm here to help. If you didn't know already, I offer one-to-one coaching specifically for people who work on or around growth teams who want to have a bigger influence and impact in their roles. Maybe you're navigating some tough moments, whether it's managing your team or handling feedback. Maybe you just want to step into a bigger leadership role. Or maybe you're at a unicorn company today and you want to make sure that the company doesn't outgrow your skill set. Either way, I can help. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, head to deliveringvalue.co/coaching to learn a little bit more and set up a call with me to see if we jive. All right, enough from me. Back to the episode. And so he gave you a little bit of swag, right? So he took this moment that could have been viewed as a mistake or a misstep or a sign or whatever, and he turned it into something that you got to take with you and then give to others, which is beautiful. And is the thing we're all trying to do when we have tough moments. I'm curious, as I share that, if there's been another time where you felt like you had made a mistake, where there's been something either tactical or like a leadership misstep, something that you think back on that obviously this could have been a misstep. It sounds like when you were doing the AMA, but something that in retrospect was just a miss. Have you had any of those?
Oh yeah, I've made so many mistakes. One of my core beliefs is like to try to normalize. And I love this about your podcast and just your philosophy clearly as a coach is if we can just normalize it and get past it. Cause I think we've turned into these really coiny mantras like fail fast. And it's like, check. But are we actually encouraging someone to like fall on their face and they still have as much value when they stand up? Because I think a lot of cultures say they do that and they don't. And there's a lot to dig in there. But so I've made a lot of mistakes, some bigger than others. I think some are on the hard skills side, like where I've actually hurt the business. And I'll probably share one of those because it's probably one of the bigger lessons I've learned from. There's also been the soft skill side, right? Like just falling flat on your face as a leader or manager, saying the wrong thing, showing up poorly, right? So we can talk about that another day. But one mistake that really stands out to me, I'll share this because it was at ClassPass and oh man, I still think about this one sometimes. But basically it was like I was CMO, I just come in, we're going through our first big season, 1/1, January 1st, obviously big time for New Year's resolutions and fitness. And most people don't know, but ClassPass, which is now since combined with MindBody and has become Playlist and gone on to do much more than fitness. But at the time, that was our business. A huge percent of our annual revenue came from like December 26th signups to like February 15th. Right? Because it's like,
wow, it's a pretty tight window.
Mm-hmm. And it's truly, you almost feel like you're in retail, holidays, you're checking, refreshing every second to see those signups and all your promotional campaign seasonality goes into that. Anyways, it was my first bigger, I'm here to show off what I can do. And man, so we shipped it and it's important because we go after with a big promotion, one of our lowest kind of margin cuts, we go out. And we want new acquisitions, and we're really looking to get back people that have churned. But what we don't want is people who have churned 2 or 3 or 4 times and they're abusing the system. And we certainly don't want to encourage cancellations and have someone sign back up and mess up our economics. The only way to protect against that is to have some sort of really smart fraud logic in the sign, checkout process. And I just missed. We did the whole promotion and process. And when we went through it and all of our QA, we allowed this kind of, really big exposure on fraud. And so we had a massive fraud problem that year and it really hurt us. We had a lot of cancellations, churn spiked. And I remember we met up in a room, a bunch of us were in there, product leaders, me, BI, and our CEO, Fritz, who's still the CEO today, and just like truly a really great CEO. And he held it together for a couple minutes, but then he was just like, does everyone understand? Like, what happened here? Like, this is a big deal. And we should have picked up on it sooner. We should have fixed it faster. It should have never happened. And we all just kind of got quiet. And I think that was the mistake I made. But the bigger mistake is like, I did not take accountability for it. And he when he left the room, I remember kind of looking around the room, almost trying to see someone else take accountability. And I hate that I'm admitting it, but I'm kind of like, is anyone else going to lean in on this one? And then genuinely, it was my fault. This is a marketing promotion. It's a marketing campaign. It's my fault. And so I remember I met with Fritz the next day and I kind of, took accountability, and he pushed me to take even more. And he was like, because what the real mistake wasn't just the mistake. It was like, I wasn't working great with my product leaders. Like there was a real silo there. I probably should have done more, like owned more of the QA, right? I was kind of like saving some of that off, pushing it off my team. There's a lot of mistakes in there. And then not taking accountability at first. And so I think back to that because I learned a lot of lessons about how to work better with product, which I think is critical, obviously. But I think the bigger lesson is, one, like you own what you own. You don't get to just own it when it goes well. And I know it sounds so obvious, but honestly, Andrew, I hadn't really learned that lesson yet because like things had gone largely well. And I think there was so much power when I'd gone back into my partners. And certainly when I stood up in front of the marketing org and I was like, this is on me and on us. And it really shifted the way we thought about what we owned, which isn't just about acquiring in, but making sure the economics of the business make sense. So I learned a lot that day. And ultimately, it shaped a lot of my philosophy on accountability because I think, again, Fritz did give me a safe place to fail, like in a sense, right? He didn't wait to say whoever in this room is accountable is getting fired. He kind of appropriately expressed his disappointment in someone not taking accountability,
So I'm always curious when something like this happens, how you handle yourself afterwards. I'll be vulnerable. So for me, if that was me, and I realized what happened, it would be very tempting for me to come in for the next quarter and keep my head down. And I'm projecting a little bit, do you feel any of that?
Exactly.
How do you prevent that from happening? Like, how does somebody not be scared at work when something bad happens, right? Because when you work scared, you take less risks, you have less wins. Bad things generally happen when you work scared. How did you prevent yourself from working scared?
I mean, honestly, Andrew, I did do that. I did do a little bit of what you said. And by the way, I think I learned a lot at ClassPass. I made a lot of mistakes there, like in the sense of that 3 years was like a very formative 3 years because it was such a fast growing company and it was so analytical and the economics of financial expansion we were doing. There was a lot of skills that I was doing, things I was doing for the first time. And I remember every time I learned a lesson, I did get a little quieter and maybe a little softer in the sense. And then in the areas I was doing really well, I like kind of shifted my attention to, and like I'd probably over-index there if I'm being really honest with your listeners. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons, like I ended up leaving ClassPass, right? I think then I learned I have to do a different playbook. Like sometimes you have to leave a company to learn the lesson, even if I loved my time at ClassPass. It was one of my best seasons. But like, I think only when I went into a new company could I then, when I had a mistake, I came in a little differently. Now, I don't get quieter after I make a mistake. I like own it really fast and tell everyone and try to like actually make a whole thing about it because I've learned that makes me feel better faster and also encourages people to do the same. I remember I actually made a mistake at Spring Health like late last year and I wrote in the marketing Slack, hey, all, I just did this. I thought this could be a fun thing. Why don't we all write in Slack our biggest mistakes? And like whoever has the biggest mistake like wins. And it was like one of those healthy Slacks where everyone went bananas. And it was just like a really beautiful moment where people were like, I lost the company $100,000. Like I lost the company $300,000. I sent an email with the wrong subject line to 2 million people. Like, and so I don't think there's a perfect answer, but sometimes after a mistake, you do need to get quiet and that's how you process it. And then you emerge. And sometimes after a mistake, you need to be loud and scream it. And that's how you process. And like, I think it depends on the culture you're in and where you are on your journey.
Man, I asked that question to Brian Balfour, and I'll reshare his story for anyone who hasn't listened to his episode, but he shared some crazy story about when he worked at HubSpot in the early days. And he screwed up, and Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot at that time, pulled him into a room and was basically like, dude, you had a massive fuck up. This is all your fault type of thing. And I asked him that question. I was like, dude, how do you go to work the next week after that when that happens? He was like, I don't know, man, next play, like sports analogy, like you just got to go next play. And that's what I realized. Like, that's why I like doing this show because everyone has a different perspective.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had that in me for a long, maybe still today. I don't know if I could just go next play and have something horrible happen and then just wipe the slate clean and pretend like Monday afterwards that I'm the same guy. That's just not in me, I don't think, you know?
Well, and I will say this because I'm so thankful I got to work for Brian as he was my CEO at Reforge. I will say this, like he is an incredibly resilient man. Like I think there's a spectrum of resilience, right? And like, it doesn't mean you won't, like you get more resilient as you encounter more things. That's resilience building, right? And I loved working for Brian. He made me feel very comfortable to say, I don't know something. I've never done that. Like he creates a very big culture in that way. But I do think it is interesting because so much of it is baked into how we're brought up or what we observed. Like maybe in your first job, you saw someone get reamed out and that shaped you in a way you can't even remember. And so I always try to, maybe it's a little cliche, but I try to have a really big dose of empathy on this because everyone's going to react one way right when it happens. And that might not even be how they want to react. But I'm different now. Like I make a mistake. I am a little bit more like, what's the next play? And partly, Andrew, not to like go on a rant here, but because I don't stitch as much of my value to my job.
Ooh, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Share more about that and how you do that.
Oh, so, I mean, early in my career, it was who I was. It was me. Right. I was it. And, you know, we can all have had those moments. And sometimes those moments last your entire career. And I feel bad for those people because like, I'm just not that anymore. I remember after, you know, the first time I ever took a career break and I didn't have a title to put in between the commas. Because in marketing, we talk about you are what you are between the commas. I don't know if you've heard that, like in press releases, like a company, our whole job is to try to get in between the comma pull through, which is like the perfect, tight, sexiest, most valuable statement of what a company is, you know, in between the commas. And I didn't have anything to put in between the commas. And I remember I had a crisis. Like, I just didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to describe myself. And so I felt a lot of shame in that. And over the years, I've been lucky enough. I mean, sometimes when you fill your life up with other things, I have an amazing husband. I have an amazing daughter. I've also experienced other losses. Like I lost 2 children on the way to have my daughter. And that reminded me of what matters. Like all these moments helped me unstitch from my job. So yes, I'm a CMO, I'm a marketer. People sometimes say it's the first word they think of, but the people that really know me the longest, like it's like the 19th word they think of. And I think I'm like proud of that. And, you know, I always say like it could go away in a minute and that doesn't mean I'm the constant and I am not my job. So I think that takes a lot of work. It takes therapy and coaching from people like you and really great mentors and a lot of bitch slaps until all of a sudden you just wake up one day and you're like, I no longer want to put my value in a title that someone else controls. That's my real thoughts on it, real talk thoughts.
No, that's beautiful. I want that to be one of the main takeaways, hopefully from this show, is that your job isn't your identity. I think most of us struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I think the era of tech that I grew up in, so to speak, encourage that.
I agree.
And in fact, it was kind of hard to avoid, right? Like we would talk, it's like, oh, this feels like family. You'd always be hanging out with your coworkers after work. A lot of the sweatshirts and t-shirts I have would be company brand. It was so hard not to fall into that. And so it's really hard to break that when that's been a huge part of your life and work experience.
I couldn't agree with you more, by the way. I mean, it took me years to get rid of some of my old swag. And I remember even to the point where like I was holding it was like that and like something I had from like my teddy bear when I was 5. I was like, why are these two holding the same amount of value to me? Like, I think it's an interesting thing because one, I think people stay in unhealthy places too long for that reason. I think people carry a sense of obligation and responsibility to someone else that does not carry the same obligation or responsibility to them. So like one of my big life values is reciprocity. And like kind of, I call it this concept of like karmapreneurship, which is like, I give to you, you give to me, right? Interconnectedness. And we do it equally, right? Which is why like I love my husband, like this partnership we have. We grew up in a time where like we gave everything to these employers and they gave us some stuff back. But like the end of the day, like we still are just employed by them. And the title is as valuable and as needed as they decide, right? And so I don't know. I mean, I do believe in my life. A big part of my impact will have been found in my career and what I consider my vocation. But I've learned that it's more to do with the people I shape and build and the stories I tell that inspire, or the brands I build that make the world healthier and help us heal, and has less to do with the title I held, the seat I sat in, you know, the position I filled. Every time I've done that path, it has burned me fast and hard, and still left scars to this day,
So you've talked about a few of the shifts in your mindset that have helped you find this balance and are sort of part of this, I don't want to say second act, but a little bit of your second act, right? So the beginning of your career really tied up in work and accomplishments. Have there been other mindset shifts or rituals or habits that have helped you survive and maybe thrive at times in this crazy world that we work in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in like what you're doing, like reflection in the sense of trying to find a nugget. Like for better or worse, I'll always be a bit of a market researcher, which is like, what's an interesting insight that can kind of shift the whole conversation. I do think the capable, not qualified is up there on the list, and that's been a big one for me. I think for me, the rituals are a really big part of this. And I've always been very aware of the power of the mind-body connection and how, a healthy body creates a healthy mind, and showing up well means showing up whole. So I think for me, a lot of the rituals are in that vein. The meditation, like I meditate every day. Sometimes I meditate twice a day. And during really hard seasons when I'm under pressure or before a board meeting and after a board meeting, I meditate 3 or 4 times. Like to me, it works and I love it. Working out, drinking water, taking vitamins, like that is as important to me as reading the latest tech news or knowing what's kind of happening in AI. Like I think to show up in my job, I have to feel full, like full body full. So those rituals really matter to me. And I think you can see it, right? I always say this to my team, but it's not just about showing up with your battery. Like, where's your battery? It's like, I always say to my team, if you can't show up at the line or above the line today, don't show up. It's all good. Take the day, my friend. Take a week, what you need, but don't try to show up because it's not going to work for you. And it's sure as hell not going to work for us. And then you're just going to spend the next couple of weeks trying to manage that disaster. And that's the lesson I learned that really shaped me, which is I don't need to be perfect all the time. But I do have a responsibility as a leader when I can't be really good for the team to not come in, to not show up, and to demonstrate that it's okay to not come in, which I think a lot of my teams have appreciated because, I don't know, the need to always show up so great, I think it's not true and not possible,
Right. Most people power through. They try to put on a good face. They try to power through. They drink an extra cup of coffee because it's not safe for them to do otherwise. And
Correct.
So that's beautiful that you've created a safe space for that to happen, because I think most people are too scared
Agreed.
to say, hey, I don't feel my best today and I'm going to take a day off because of that. I don't think I would have ever felt comfortable.
Yeah, it's because a lot of these companies don't. Like, even if they're preaching it, right? Even if they say they are that type of culture, they're not. And I think these are the things that I vet for now when people come to me and say, I'm looking at these 2 jobs and they're like, this is a category series at B, C, and I'm like, cool, check. Let's talk about what really matters. Like, what's the tenure of the employees? Like, how do they think about employee thriving? Like, have you talked to someone who's exited? Like, I just think it's really hard to get a sense of the environment. But back to the original thing earlier in this episode, like, you will only be as successful as the environment is set up to help you succeed. So I just think it's tough because some really great talent goes to some really hard places and they're unsuccessful. And then they're left thinking, why wasn't I successful? What did I do wrong? So those are the things. I mean, I'm still learning lots of mindset shifts, and I take all suggestions on rituals and things that can set me up for success. But I think there's maybe just an understanding of my limits that has become my most powerful asset.
Thank you for coming on and sharing the journey, sharing some of the ideas, and certainly the messy middle along the way. For folks who are following that want to connect with you, where should we send them?
Yeah, send them to LinkedIn. We'll connect on LinkedIn. I've got my newsletter on there, which is Building Beautiful Things, which is, where I share all my rambles and thoughts and lessons. So that's a good place to start as well. It's been so fun, Andrew. Thank you so much. I love this approach to connecting us all through shared experiences because it really is the whole point,
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing.